thank you so much for joining us today for the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. Here on the Pastor's Potluck, it's similar to a normal potluck where you might get something that you want and there may be something that you just want to pass up altogether. And that's okay. There's something here for everybody. Our goal here is to encourage you and maybe in the process entertain you. If you're ready, let's dig in. Well, thank you so much once again for joining us for another episode of the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. It's all about Christmas. It's all about prophecy. It's all about dun dun dun. Something crazy. Insert right there.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, like whenever you study the Bible and then things start to click and you're like, oh, this person's talking about this and then this and that. And then what's even crazier is like if you start to put like the math together to see like all of this, like the probability of something like this happening. It's like if I showed up and I said, Scott, your great grandchildren one day, somebody's gonna win $1 billion lottery. Like the chances of that are extreme, like astronomical.
Oh yeah, it's so low.
Like it's fractions of fractions of fractions, like tiny.
Yeah.
But that happens time and time again in the Bible. And so whenever we get into talking about this a little bit, you're going to begin to sit there and go, the likelihood of something like this and every single little detail coming to fruition, it's got to be a God thing. Yeah,
it's like it really is. Like if you've ever heard me talk about prophecy before, especially we talk a lot about it in apologetics, like when we're doing defenses of the faith, because the prophecies about Jesus are kind of like overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like the Jewish scriptures, which we call the Old Testament, it was already set in stone by the time Jesus was ever on the scene.
Yeah.
Right. So like, so we have to understand that is a really strong, like, these weren't things that like, oh, we saw this happen in the life of Jesus and then we went back and said Isaiah said this. Like, no, these things were like set in stone already. And then you see someone coming along and it's not just that he fit the unique fingerprint of the prophesied one that was to come for Israel, like by like, oh, he did this one thing and this one thing.
Yeah. Over
300 prophecies from the Old Testament are fulfilled in Jesus.
And we're going to talk about them today.
100. It's mind-blowing. Somebody did a study on it, and I'll probably butcher this because it's like when we did the Joseph thing, I told you, like, my mind, the way it works, I may know a ton of stuff on a topic, but once I'm done studying it, it's like my mind empties it.
Yeah.
So I'm just as open as I can when it comes to like Old Testament prophecy is probably my really, really, really weak spot where I need to spend more time. But there was a guy that did a study on prophecy about Jesus that he showed if like the unbelievable likelihood of eight prophecies being fulfilled by one person in this manner is like, he said if you were to take the state of Texas, which, you know, that's close to home for you, and you can attest to how big Texas is. Like,
it's huge.
When you told me you could start off in Texas and drive 8 hours in either way and still not be out of Texas, like, it's huge.
Yeah.
So this guy did the probability of 8 prophecies coming true about one person. He said it would be like if you took the state of Texas and filled it, I cannot remember what the height was, with silver dollars.
I read that
2 feet, 3 feet high or something.
2 to 3 feet high of silver dollars,
and one of them had a red X on it.
Yeah,
and you were just catapulted into the state.
Yeah,
that's filled with all these silver dollars. The likelihood of you just choosing that one silver dollar.
Yeah.
Is the same as it would be for 8 prophecies from the Old Testament to be fulfilled by Jesus.
Yeah, they said if they took a guy and blindfolded him and told him he can go in any direction for however long he wanted to, just as long as he stayed within the confines of the area of state of Texas, and then he just stopped and randomly picked one up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
8, and that's for 8 prophecies.
Yeah.
And Jesus of Nazareth fulfilled over 300.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's mind-blowing. Now, people that look at the New Testament and go, oh, that was all made up, whatever. Okay, that's not going to convince you. I get that, but, like, first off, there's a really good reason to believe that the New Testament is a historical documents that were founded, or written by eyewitnesses, or at least people that were connected to eyewitnesses or interviewed eyewitnesses. So if you're going to be skeptical about the Bible, this ain't going to work for you. But, like, I mean, there's other apologetics that we could get into with that. But, like, the prophecy stuff, like, for me, because I believe that the New Testament was written by people that were there and stuff, like, this now becomes one of those things that I think that even if I tried to lose my faith, these are the things that, like, I would go back to and be like, oh man, there's too much evidence.
Yeah.
Like, it's when we get into this, and we're only going to talk like 4 of them today, but, like, when you talk about prophecy, I mean, when you get over 300 of them fulfilled in the life of one person, like, at the very least, you should be humble enough to take a second look. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that.
Yeah. So one of them that I've always found, like, pretty interesting is because the Jews at the time were looking for someone to make kind of like this triumphant entry onto the scene and be their savior and be their leader. And Jesus did the exact opposite of that, fulfilling a prophecy, and he came as a baby. And that scripture is in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6 and 7. I'll read it for you really quick. It says, and we've heard this in the Gospels, but it says, "For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His government and its peace will never end. He will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all of eternity. The passionate commitment of the Lord of heaven's armies will make this happen." So essentially 2 prophecies there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you go even further back in that passage, there's even more. That to unpack, there's even more there. Like, Isaiah chapter 9 is one of the, like, it's incredible to sit down and talk about. And this may be the text that I go to for Christmas Eve. I'm bouncing between this and one other idea. I haven't quite wrestled it to the ground, but, like, Isaiah chapter 9, I've only preached from Isaiah 9 one time ever. And it was early on in ministry. It was in a series called God With Us. And I remember Pastor Mark assigned me this passage, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I remember calling the sermon, "What is it that you need?" Yeah. And I was talking about how, like, this baby that comes at Christmas, like, he's all of this stuff that passage just said. Yeah. And at different times in your life, you're going to need these different aspects of Jesus. And it really is a incredible prophecy, because here we are, Isaiah is prophesying 700 years before Jesus comes onto the scene. Before the first Christmas, Isaiah says this 700 years in advance. And he says, a child's born, a son's given, the government will rest on his shoulders. Like, now, the way that the Jews were reading this, they were taking that in a very literal sense, that, like, this promise was that this Messiah that was coming was going to be an earthly political type king. Yeah. And this is why, even to this day, so many Jews that are very well acquainted with the Old Testament scriptures, why they still reject Jesus as the Messiah, is because in their mind, that was not, like, who Jesus was and how he went about this, the way that his rule and reign, his kingdom was to spread, was not, like, it wasn't what they were thinking. They were looking political. They were looking military, right? This is one of the reasons why, someone like Ben Shapiro, who has utmost respect for people of faith, he's a very devout Jew, but the reason why he rejects Christianity is, I mean, he doesn't find the New Testament to be valid, first off, but then second off, he's like, who Jesus was not the type of person we were looking for, so he could not be this person. And I go, like, that's because you're not, like, for me, that statement, the government is going to rest upon his shoulders, they're not talking about a physical government as far as, like, like that. He's saying that this person, his kingdom, is going to be like, it's speaking to that. It's speaking to the kingdom thing. The government's going to rest upon his shoulder. He's going to be the one that like brings God's kingdom in its initial form, and ultimately that thing is going to spread. Like, that's really what this is pushing to. We're not talking about some great political leader that's going to show up on the scene and overthrow the Romans and overthrow whatever oppressive regime is oppressing Israel at this time. Like, that's not what this child that's being prophesied is going to do. And then it goes on, it says he's going to be the wonderful counselor, the mighty God, everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. Now, sometimes, depending on the translation, you'll have a wonderful and then comma and then counselor. And I don't think that there's quite consensus yet. Last time I studied this, there wasn't really consensus whether that was right or whether it should be like the NLT does it, wonderful counselor, or like he's a really good counselor. Like, meaning, and what this is pointing to is, okay, this Messiah that's coming, who's going to have a kingdom, and this kingdom is going to reign for all time. He is going to be so full of wisdom. So they're looking for somebody full of wisdom. That's what it means to be a good counselor. We're not talking like in our context, we think counselor, we're like, oh, he's going to be the guy that I talk to when I lay down on a couch and tell him all my deepest, darkest fears or something.
Jesus is sitting there with a notebook and taking notes.
Like, no, wonderful counselor is pointing to the fact that he's going to be someone of great wisdom. Yeah. And if you go and look at the teachings of Jesus, like, people were always amazed at the wisdom that he came and the way that he taught and the authority that he talked to. And so the whole debate about whether it should be wonderful, comma, counselor, comma, or wonderful counselor, comma, doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, Jesus is wonderful, and he is counselor.
A wonderful counselor.
And he is a wonderful counselor. So he can be all three of those things, so it doesn't really matter how you want to translate that. So it's like, okay, he is that. He's wonderful counselor. And then it says mighty God. So this is so crazy, like all the way 700 years before Jesus comes on the scene, before the church can be accused of saying that the one that is coming is God. Like, because that's what, after Jesus did what he did, after his life, death, and resurrection, the skeptics would say, listen, they didn't think Jesus was God initially, but people hundreds of years later read that back into these ancient documents that Jesus was God. And I will tell you, no. If those Jews that saw Jesus as the Messiah were acquainted with Isaiah chapter 9, they knew that this one that was coming, he wasn't going to just be any other ruler. Yeah. This was going to be God himself coming in human form. That's what they should have been looking for. Yeah. And so, like, this baby that comes at Christmas, this is the prophecy is, hey, this baby is going to be like no other baby that's ever been born. Yeah. And when he, this is a different situation. And with him, not only is coming wisdom, but also strength. Yeah. But then, like, if you go and look at that,
and the only people that knew that he was coming were the ones that the angel revealed to them that, hey, the Messiah is here.
Yeah. And if you think, oh, mighty God, okay, so they're expecting someone big, strong, powerful. And then you get Jesus, who really, by all accounts, meek, mild, allowed people to, I don't want to say get the best of him, but like he allowed people to sometimes like impose on him. Yeah. I mean, he literally let people grab him, arrest him.
But also look at whenever he comes in as a baby, you're talking about the absolute most vulnerable of all creation. Yeah. Is an infant. Like, there is no defense mechanism that they have in place that protects them from anything. Yeah. It's up to their parents to be able to nurture them and lead them and help them grow. Yeah. And so people are not looking in those areas for something so weak, and even as cute as babies are, there's just no strength there,
Yeah. And so, like, even in his birth and his life and his ministry, there were times that you could see this mightiness, you could see the strength and the power. Then there were other times that he didn't look like that at all, which is, that's like a prophecy that you mentioned to me earlier this week, Isaiah 53. Yeah. This is why, like, when you read Isaiah 53, it's like, man, this dude, sometimes people will interpret that passage, like, when they're reading it, like, that they don't even think Jesus was a handsome person, because it talks about how there was nothing about him that was appealing to people whatsoever.
Yeah.
And this is why so many Jews, even up to this day, have missed the fact that the Messiah has come, because they're looking for someone big, strong, mighty, going to overthrow the regimes of the world.
Yeah.
And because that person hasn't come in the way that they thought he should come, they've missed him. And so they were looking for someone with great wisdom, looking for someone with great power. And depending on how you look at Jesus of Nazareth, yes, he checks both of those boxes. Now, sure, you could look in a different way and go like, he seems pretty weak, when he's hung naked as a criminal on a cross. But that's a whole nother story, right? That's a whole one of the really neat themes about the Bible is that something like it's when things die that things actually begin to really grow and come to life.
Yeah.
Right? Like a seed, like Jesus even teaches us, a seed goes into the ground and dies. That's actually what's happening when a seed when you plant a seed, it actually dies, and then something sprouts out of it.
Yeah.
So this whole idea that even on the cross, what looked like weakness was actually unbelievable strength. And, because, I guess Satan would have gone a different way of a different route had he known that through what looked like his victory was actually his very demise. Right? So Jesus didn't fit the bill for what they were looking for if they were looking for someone great and mighty, in the sense of, like, why did Jesus not raise up the armies of Israel and overthrow Rome if he was this Messiah and such? And it's like, that's not what the picture really is. And so he goes on and says, everlasting Father. Now, this isn't supposed to be like mixing terms to go like, well, wait a second, I thought Jesus was the Son. This is saying he's everlasting Father. A better translation of this is actually the Father of eternity, or like the idea is he is the one that if you want something eternal, he's the one that can give that to you. Like he's the origination of anything that really is going to last.
Yeah.
That's what everlasting Father means. So the everlasting part meaning like what he has to offer, it's not going to dry up like the things that we're accustomed to in this life. Like all the stuff that we know, there's an expiration date on it. Like your TV, it's not going to work eventually. Your car, it's going to end up in a junkyard.
Life.
Yeah. No matter how nice your car is right now. This was something I read sometime this year. I can't remember where I read it or heard it. But like, it doesn't matter. You could be driving a Tesla right now. You could be driving a Bugatti, like whatever. It's going to end up in a junkyard one day.
Yeah.
Like that's where all of this temporary stuff, it's cool. Don't like, would I like to drive a Tesla or something like that? Well, yeah. That'd be dope.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like I can't put very much stock in any of that stuff because it's not going to be here, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to. Those are not things that are made for eternity. They're not things that are made to last. They're temporary, so they have a meaningful blessing at this moment in life. But at the end of the day, it's going to end up in a trash heap. It's going to get recycled or whatever it is. And then I really love the fact that tied to everlasting, the title that we get here is Father.
Yeah.
Because this is the tension that we always have to have as we go through the scriptures. Is like we've been preaching on Sunday mornings right now about Jesus being king.
Yeah.
And that is one aspect of who he is. Like, listen, y'all, he is king, which means he's not really that concerned with what you think about his statutes.
Yeah.
And the way that he runs the world. He's really not concerned with what you think about that. Like he's king. But then there's this other soft side to him as well, where like God, like we can approach him as his kids as well, which is like, that's not like other kings.
Yeah.
Like other kings did not really have a soft side.
Yeah.
They only had like, they were the type of people that like, they saw everything as a nail and they were a hammer. Like they were just going to have their way. And then there is this softer side of God that we see that always balances out that like his righteousness, his holiness, his justice of being king. The Father side of it is his compassion, his love, his grace, his mercy. And like it's so hard for us to wrap our minds around that because none of us are very good at that. Yeah. Like people that are really firm people, they don't really have much of a soft side normally. Yeah. And
you look at kings and they oversaw all the decision making for the realm that they were over or whatever. But a lot of the times it wasn't like, hey, I've got all this excess, I'm going to give you some.
Yeah.
As opposed to what a father does, like with what you do with your kids or I do with my kids, like I provide for them.
Yeah.
I lift them up whenever they are down. A lot of kings don't even worry about those types of people in their kingdom, because if they're not carrying their weight or doing whatever, then it's off to the prisons and hang them up or whatever.
Yep.
But having that aspect of Jesus, and then also having that nurturing side where he's just like, like, here's a little bit of correction, but I'm doing this because I love you.
Yeah.
And I'm providing this for you, and I'm the one that you can come to no matter how much you've messed up. I don't know if you ever had that conversation with your dad. My dad one time just said, look, Jared, as bad as it ever will get, you can always just come and talk to me.
Oh, yeah.
Because he knew that I was in a part of my life to where I was just doing so much, but he always was just like, the door's always open. As much as he probably sometimes didn't want to allow the door open, he was still a good father to me.
Yeah.
And that's the same aspect of who Jesus is. He's still good to us. And, it's good stuff.
Yeah. And then it follows up. The last title that we get here is Prince of Peace.
Yeah.
And there's this is so multifaceted of a term, because the first thing when you think of Prince of Peace is that Jesus, one of the things he does, and this gets lost on people, and the Bible clearly says this, but if you were to say this to just an average person, they would be very offended probably. But understand that if you are still in your sins and you have not confessed to Jesus, you are an enemy of God.
Yep.
Like that is what the scriptures say. There's no way to, like, as we just talked about God being a father. So listen, that's still true. But on the other hand, those who are not with Jesus, you are seen as an enemy of God. And so the really cool thing Jesus does when he comes as the Prince of Peace is the first peace that he's trying to make is a ceasefire between you and God.
Yeah.
Like, that's the first way that he becomes the Prince of Peace, is like, listen, you'll never experience peace in these other areas of life until you have first experienced peace with God.
Yeah.
Because you have to end the hostility between you and God. And then what happens is once peace comes in that way, that you and God are at rest with one another, that is under control, then you can begin to make peace with yourself. You can begin to make peace with others. You can become a peace agent in the world. But listen, you will not do that to its full extent apart from finding peace with God.
Yeah.
And but if you just walked up to the average person on the side of the road and hey, do you follow Jesus? They go, no. Listen, you're an enemy of God. That's not like a real good evangelism
They're
strategy.
Gonna either fight you or just laugh at you in your face.
But it is 100% true. This is exactly what the scriptures say. You're an enemy of God. And so Jesus came as the Prince of Peace. Yes, he offers us peace. Right? He has a peace. The New Testament talks about a peace that passes all understanding. And we do have that, and we've all probably experienced that if we're serious about our faith.
Oh, yeah.
But don't miss that the peace that Jesus was bringing, they thought it was going to be peace with the powerful regimes of this world, that Israel would finally come and not be oppressed anymore. That is not the peace that Jesus was coming to bring.
Yeah.
He was coming to bring a peace between you and God, a peace in your soul, that then you become an agent of peace in your own life and in the lives of others.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily and some of that might be, hey, let's work in our world for peace between nations as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fully believe that. But that's only possible because of the peace that is available to humanity with God.
Yeah.
Because, we talked about this in the Genesis series. If it was not for what Jesus did, the arrows of Jesus in his bow would still be pointed at humanity.
Yeah.
But they are not. At this moment, they are not whatsoever, because he was willing to pay the price for us to be able to have peace with him. And so those four things are so important. So what is it that you need? Maybe you need wisdom, go to Jesus. Maybe you need some strength, go to Jesus. Maybe you need to put stock in some eternal things rather than the temporary. Go to Jesus, and maybe you do need to find peace with God, or if you want peace within yourself, it starts by finding, like, if you need one of those things, that's Jesus is the full embodiment of all four of those things.
Yeah.
His government and its peace will never end, verse 7 says. He will rule with a fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity, and the passionate commitment of the Lords of heaven's armies will make all of this happen. So, again, we go back, his government. We're not talking about political things in nature. We're talking about his kingdom, which rules and reigns in the hearts of believers right now and is spreading, but one day will come to a full consummation in the new heavens and the new earth when there's no longer a need for a temple or lights or anything, because God himself will be the temple. God himself will be in the midst of his people, and Jesus of Nazareth will be reigning as the rightful king of all of creation, and that's something that it's never going to come to an end. And what will characterize the reign of Jesus in small ways right now, but fully whenever he comes back again, is fairness, justice. Those are going to be what are the standards in God's new creation.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a place anymore where the weak are oppressed.
Yeah, and understanding that, like, whenever you say that, that's why the Jews were just looking for somebody like crazy, and not crazy, but just like very, very outlandish and stood out and was easy to pick out in a crowd, and they weren't looking for a baby.
Yeah, and so the hope of those first century Jews, whenever Jesus shows up on the scene and there's this like possible Messiah figure, and then they end up rejecting him because he doesn't end up overthrowing Rome. This whole idea that that he's supposed to go and overthrow these world powers, these regimes, these horrible, awful people that are responsible for a lack of justice in our world and a lack of fairness in our world.
Yeah.
They were looking for someone that was going to overthrow all those. Now, they're 100% right in that they should be looking for that person.
Yeah.
But they were looking in a very temporal sense. Like, hey, Rome is really awful to us, God. Could you go ahead and send that Messiah to take care of Rome?
Yeah.
Listen, when Jesus comes back, he's going to take care of a lot more than Rome.
Yeah.
Every corrupt, oppressive regime that has ever stood in creation is going to come under the feet of Jesus.
Yeah.
Like think of all the injustice in the world, and like Christians, we should be the most justice-focused people on the face of the earth, because that is the very character of God. All of these world leaders that like we're frustrated with because of the lack of equity in our world, because of the lack of justice, apart from Jesus, they're going to get their comeuppance.
Yeah.
Like they're going to get their just desserts. Every oppressive ruler that has ever oppressed people is going to get exactly what they deserve when the kingdom of God comes in its fullness. And so the first century Jews were looking for someone that was going to do that to Rome, but they were thinking too small, because this king, he's going to put every single national leader and anyone that has ever oppressed people that has not repented, they're going to get exactly what they deserve.
Yeah.
And so this should drive us as people of God's kingdom to be people of fairness, people of justice. That means like when we see injustice in the world, we should rightfully call this out. We should rightfully work for the, for the setting free of people that are being oppressed.
Yeah.
Like we should. That's the call of God's people, to work for justice and equity and fairness in this world, and too often we just sit by on the sidelines, hoping that one day God will just come and fix it all for us. But like he wants to use us as his agents now to begin that process.
Yeah.
And so he's going to sit on the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity. That's a prophecy fulfilled as well, whereas God had promised David that someone would sit on his throne for all time.
Yeah.
That there would always be a king in the line of David. And that's why Jesus was born as an ancestor of King David, thus fulfilling this promise to David, hey, someone will always be on your throne.
Yeah. And whenever Jesus arrives on the scene, he's that's it.
That's
forever.
Yeah. He is Like what Jesus did on the cross
Yeah.
secures him as king of all creation,
Mm-hmm.
thus fulfilling the promise to David.
Yep.
And thus also making a way for goodness and blessing to come to the whole created order.
Yeah.
Because the covenant has now been fulfilled. That covenant that God had with ancient Israel that said, listen, you are going to be the conduit of blessing to the whole created order. Through you, I'm going to bless the nations. That was the promise. It happens through the covenant faithfulness of Jesus on the cross. Yes, at the cross, he took care of your sins, but he also made the way for blessing to flow to not just ethnic Israel, but to everyone that has ever lived now has an opportunity to share in that blessing that Jesus brought through his victory on the cross. And that is what, like, the ascension after the resurrection, this is something that sometimes we go like the only time that we go to the ascension a lot of times is right around Easter, and the preacher will go, in the same way that you saw him go, he'll return to you one day. And the shallow version of the interpretation of the ascension is, well, Jesus went back up to heaven. He's going to come back down one day. That's what we're waiting on. We're just sitting here waiting on that. You have to realize what happened at the moment of his ascension was the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 7.
Mm-hmm.
When he ascended back to the Father, if you'll go to Daniel 7, another prophecy that the Son of Man approaches the Ancient of Days. And in that moment, he is handed all dominion, all authority, all power is given to the Son of Man.
Yeah.
And from that moment forward, Jesus is the rightful king of all creation. And that's how David's throne is always occupied.
Yeah.
Because there is now a king reigning, and his reign is never coming to an end.
Yeah. One of the ones that the prophecies that just kind of, I can only imagine, and I'll try to set this up as best as I can, but I can only imagine just reading this and you're sitting there going, a virgin giving birth, like that don't make sense.
Oh, yeah.
And it's found in Isaiah chapter 7, and I'll set this up, and you could tell that there's some frustration with Isaiah addressing David or the family of David. It says, listen, well, you royal family of David, isn't it enough to exhaust human patience? Must you exhaust the patience of my God as well? All right, then. The Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us.
Yeah,
it's kind of like it's like they're like, whenever you read that, obviously there's some frustration with Isaiah and David's family, probably his lineage, or more than likely his lineage, and so. What do you mean a virgin's gonna give? What do you mean a virgin's gonna give birth?
Yeah,
Isaiah, you've lost it.
Yeah, well, and some people have really tried to go after the terminology of virgin in the New Testament passages as well as this one to try to say oh no, those words just denote that it's going to be a young girl, a teenager.
You gave a really good explanation for this in our men's Bible study. And hopefully you could say it word for word, but explain the importance of the virgin birth.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, this is something. I did a study on Hebrews. We used to have a Wednesday night church service pre-COVID. And one of those years, probably 2017, 2018, somewhere around there, I did a full study on the book of Hebrews on Wednesday nights. And this is something that I learned through that process. And, in fact, I even called some OBGYNs and some medical professionals because I was like, well, wait a second, you got to explain this to me from the medical side as well as I understand the spiritual side. But listen, the virgin birth, we cannot just go and say, oh no, Mary was just a young girl, teenager that got impregnated and then God used her son. Yeah, we cannot say that, and here's why. The virgin birth is a necessity for the Christian faith. because without the virgin birth, there is no salvation through Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah.
Now, that's a really strong statement that not many people would probably ever publicly say. And in fact, I found out I said this earlier. I said this like last year, I think, at some point, and like somebody left the church over it, which I didn't know that they left the church, but like somebody subsequently told me, like, hey, yeah, this guy left the church because you said this, because he doesn't believe that the virgin birth is, like, he doesn't feel like he should have to believe that. So, okay, well, that's fine. This is one of those areas, like, you know, we talk about all the time here. There's primary issues, there's secondary issues. If you don't like women in ministry, we can still hang out and talk. If you don't like, you know, my eschatology, you don't like that I'm an amillennial with a little touch of preterist in there, that's fine. We can still be friends. If you didn't deny the virgin birth of Jesus, you've thus thrown all of Christianity in the trash.
Yeah.
Here's why. We need for Jesus' sacrifice to be the perfect Lamb of God without spot or blemish, the one whose life is a perfect record of obedience and covenant faithfulness to God. Without that, if Jesus was just another flawed person, he would not be fit to be that perfect sacrifice that takes away the sins of the world. So why is the virgin birth necessary for that? Couldn't Jesus have just been born, humanly speaking, and then not sinned? No. Because of the fall of creation in Genesis chapter 3, because of the wrong that our ancient ancestors introduced into the world, every single person that has been conceived by an earthly father has inherited a sin nature.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the crazy thing that I found when I went and talked to OBGYNs and things like that. Now, and you got to hear me when I say this. This sin nature that we're talking about is not passed physically, right?
Yeah.
Like in a sense, like when I say this, like, listen, I'm not talking.
It's not in your genetics,
but like, yeah, that would be a ridiculous thing to say. But when it comes to how a baby is developed and where their blood comes from, the mother supplies 0 of the blood. And in fact, if the mother's blood mixed with the child's blood, the child would die. So therefore, the father is fully responsible for passing that into the child.
Yeah.
And so that's what necessitates a virginal birth, because God, being the heavenly Father, and now look, we're not talking about weird stuff like, and I don't mean to be condescending to
anybody that believes in like Greek mythology or something,
like Mormonism, particular, that where they believe there was a physical action that took place between God and Mary. No, that's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
There was a supernatural conception that took place apart from any weird sexual stuff that the Mormons talk about. And I'm really not trying to be condescending, but that whole doctrine just really, really bothers me. But it was completely necessary for Jesus to be of divine birth so that he's not past his sin nature in any way from his Father.
Mm-hmm.
He's so this virgin birth. And again, I'm not saying, oh, well, if you got your dad's blood, that's how you became sinful. No, you have innate sinfulness in us as humanity. But because Jesus was born different.
Yeah.
That's probably the best way to say it, because you could just reject all the blood stuff that I said and all that. Because Jesus was born differently, it meant that he was able to be sinless in his life. And we can't debate the sinlessness of Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, because when you get rid of the virginal birth, you get rid of the sinlessness of Jesus. If you get rid of the sinlessness of Jesus, you get rid of the sacrifice of Jesus, being able to atone for all sin. That's why, like, even if it's hard for you to understand how God could have a son through a 15-year-old Jewish girl without, without weird stuff happening, like if that, trust me, I get it. That is a preposterous idea.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe. Like, it really is. And I don't like to sugarcoat things in the Bible that are hard to believe, because you all know my rule of thumb. if I can look rational in my faith, I'm going to 100% do whatever I possibly can to look rational. So if there's a good reason to see things maybe differently than other people in Christianity, or to say, hey, look at the science behind this, look at the rationale behind this, I'm going that way every single time that I possibly can within orthodoxy.
Yeah.
But when my faith requires me to look like a fool, I will absolutely look like a fool if there's no way around it. And when it comes to the virgin birth, I'm a fool. Yeah. I will look like a fool till the day that I die, because at the moment that I deny the virgin birth, I'm no longer a Christian. I'm not, and I don't mean like, oh, you just lost your salvation. I mean like, if I deny the virgin birth, the way that I see soteriology, the study of salvation,
yeah,
Christianity just goes away.
Yeah,
like it's not there anymore. It's the same like when Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15 that if Jesus didn't really rise from the dead, then your faith is useless. The same thing is true if Jesus wasn't born of a virgin.
Yeah. Like
there's no way around, if you had two human parents, that baby's going to be sinful.
Yeah.
Because every baby that's been born of two human parents is sinful.
Yeah.
That's why the virgin birth is an absolute necessity to Orthodox Christianity. There is no getting away from it whatsoever. Now, with that being said, this whole idea of Catholics have this doctrine of the perpetual virginity of Mary. That's a ridiculous idea.
Yeah, explain that quickly, what that means, in case somebody's never heard that.
Let me, and it's not something that I'm like super familiar with, so if you're Catholic and happen to be listening to this, and if I butcher this, please show me some grace. But essentially, the virginity of Mary, they see as something that is a truth for all time. Okay. But it's a preposterous idea unless I'm totally mistaken in what they believe about this. This is why I probably shouldn't just spout stuff off on a podcast without doing the research. But like sometimes things just pop in my head. But like, she can't perpetually be a virgin. Yeah. Meaning a virgin for all time. Yeah. Because she had other kids. Yeah. Right. Like all those other kids weren't God's kids. So the perpetual virginity of Mary is
the scripture says it mentions half brothers.
Yeah, I mean, they, like Joseph had other kids with her and such. So unless I'm totally mistaken on that doctrine, which is absolutely possible, and if I am totally wrong on that or off base, you should let me know. And I promise you right now, when I leave, I'll go do the research on it as well. Yeah. But so we have to believe in the virgin birth, but we don't have to start getting silly and saying that Mary was always a virgin for the rest of her life, and even now as she sits with God in heaven, that she's still a virgin. Like we don't have to go silly, and we don't have to do what the Mormons did and go super silly and go like, oh, that passage means that God, Elohim, came down in physical form and impregnated Mary the way that everyone else has ever gotten. We don't have to go silly like that either. No. Listen, the greatest two miracles that have ever happened in the history of the world are the creation of everything out of nothing and the resurrection of Jesus. And if you can believe those two things really did happen, and I do, then God supernaturally sending a child into the womb of Mary is like small potatoes compared to, I don't know, speaking everything that we've ever seen into existence out of nothing.
Yeah, especially if you keep up with like all the updates that the James Webb Telescope is shooting pictures of, and how it's like our universe is still expanding from the day of its creation. Yeah, like you can't, quote unquote. That's what they say.
That's why the people that like get bent out of shape about like the miracles of Jesus, and I'm like, listen, go to creation. If we can say that there is some sort of supernatural being behind creation, then all this other stuff is small potatoes for him. Like, oh, he had a guy walk on water. Yeah, he also created everything with the very sound of his voice. Like, if a supernatural being exists, we should expect supernatural things to happen. Yeah. This is how I reason to all of the miracles in the Bible. This is why I think that I could teach Jesus walks on water and not look ridiculous, because I'm not tying it to, oh, you should just believe
physics.
I'm not tying it to, you should just believe this because it's in the Bible.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of Christians go about their life, which is a simple way of living, and it's very ineffective.
Yeah.
For me, I'll go, oh, you don't believe Jesus can walk on the water? Well, let's go back to this. Who created everything? Where did it come from? Is there a good scientific reason to believe in a creator behind everything?
Yeah.
I believe there is. All space, all time, all matter comes into existence all at once. And whether or not you see that as in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth in a very literal 6,000 year creation, like 6 day, seventh day rest, like fundamentalist view, or whether you take a more, a different view of that, doesn't really matter. But what we can say is something immaterial, something non-spatial, and something timeless set all of this into motion. And if that supernatural being exists, then like him sending a baby in this way is not beyond reason by any means, even though I understand that it does make you look sort of ridiculous to believe in the virgin birth, but that's one of those non-negotiables. You cannot get away from it.
Yep. This one's a little bit easier to because we all know the story, and I think that it's in some of the Christmas songs and everything, but it's found in Micah chapter 5, verse 2. It says, but you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, I don't even know how to pronounce that, are only a small village among all the people of Judah, yet a ruler of Israel, whose origins are in a distant past, will come to you on my behalf. So he's speaking about this ruler, this leader that will come out of Bethlehem, which is essentially predicting that Christ would be born in Bethlehem. That's Micah 5 verse 2.
Yeah. And look, because I told you my work on the Old Testament prophets is very lacking up to this point.
Yeah.
In my pastoral and faith journey, so like I had to go to the index to find exactly.
You don't remember the song?
No, I don't know the order of the Old Testament books the way that I do the New Testament books.
Yeah.
But I also, for the sake of time, wanted to get here really fast since we're on a podcast.
Yeah.
And y'all don't want to sit here and just watch me play sword drills with myself.
I don't want to hold people hostage.
Yeah. So, this right here, and this is the prophecy that Matthew, is it in Matthew's gospel? I should know that. We've been sitting here talking about it. Repeats this prophecy right here. Oh, yeah. When the wise men show up and Herod pulls all the scribes and chief priests together and says, hey, where's the Messiah supposed to be born? This is the passage that they quote. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, are only a small village among all the people of Judah, yet a ruler of Israel whose origins are in distant past will come from you on my behalf. Man, there's so much there. First off, I do want to point out, when it says whose origins are in distant past, this is another nod to the fact that this baby that's coming is not of human origins. This is a baby, if he is of origins of distant paths, that means that baby pre-existed his inception into the world. So we see this nod that's going, listen, it's God. Like it's in some sense it's God that's coming, because this baby's origins are of old. And if baby Jesus is born sometime just before 1 AD, like probably somewhere between 3 and 6 AD, his origins can't be of old. If that's his true starting point. So that's like a really interesting thing to put. He also just nails, like, he's going to be a ruler of Israel. Yep. He's from the line of Judah. Yep. And he's born in Bethlehem, which is crazy. That here's this prophecy, and the only reason why Jesus was born in Bethlehem was not because his family did not live there. Yeah, his family was from Galilee. They were not from Bethlehem. So how did they get to Bethlehem? This is the whole thing. Like, sometimes we overlook this in Luke chapter 2. It says, in those days, Quirinius, who was a governor of Syria, which some people have tried to push back and say, no, that's not when Quirinius was governor. There's actually some archaeological stuff that's been done recently that's found that, no, there's actually a pretty good possibility that Quirinius, that this all took place, that this census brought Joseph and Mary to Joseph's hometown of Bethlehem. And that's where the child is born.
Yeah.
Now, here's what really blows your mind if you're not tracking with this. The way that this prophecy is fulfilled is literally by God using a secular, sinful human to bring about this prophecy. Because what did he do? He utilized the greed of Rome, because this census was all about collecting taxes.
Yeah.
They wanted to make sure everyone was accounted for, so the way they could go is, how much money does Jared Bodker owe us? All right, good. Now we got him on a list. You're going to pay them taxes, or you're going to get crucified or thrown in jail.
Yeah.
It was all through the greed of the Roman Empire that this takes place. And this is what I love so much, like, because people get so bent out of shape about politics in our world today, as if like God is like, man, that president right there, well, God's plan's just, I guess it's just ruined now. It's like, come on, guys, look at this. God uses a sinful, secular politician and ruler, to fulfill prophecy for the Messiah. He goes, oh, here, I'll use him, like, because you have to see God working behind the scenes in all of this. Mm-hmm. I'm going to use you. You don't even acknowledge me. You're a polytheist. Quirinius, I'm going to use you and your greed and the greed of the Roman Empire to be the very means that moves Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem to fulfill this prophecy. Yeah. So long before you get all bent out of shape about whatever's happening in the White House or whatever country you live in, you're like, oh, this election, we live and die by this election. Listen.
Yeah, it's rigged. Oh my gosh! Like what has happened?
Like,
the right person lost in this. It's like no. God's in
people that
God's in control.
You rise and fall based on how an election goes. Listen, I know that that a lot of that stuff matters for your life in some sense. I get that. But to act as if there are such monumental, catastrophic mountains that cannot be moved based on what happens in the political sphere is nonsense. Because behind all of that is the true king with all power, mm-hmm. that will intercede and will intercept and will get involved as he sees fit at any moment that he needs to right the ship.
Yeah.
And so that's why, it's older Americans, and I don't mean to pick on people, they just live and die by the government. And somebody pushed back on this one time. They were like, no, it's millennials and below that they're the ones that want to live off the government. I'm not saying these are people that are taking advantage of welfare systems and things like that. I'm saying the older people in America, because they are so used to being older Christians in America are so used to being the political majority, and they're used to being in a place where Christianity and the values of Christianity were the norm, that they feel that slipping away from them in a more secularized society. So they're used to the government being on their side to legislate their morality and their beliefs.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing. But now they're fussing constantly, because now there's seems to be a changing of the guard in the sense that Christianity is losing favor in the public sphere. That most, if not all, politicians, the ones that say they're Christians, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them are kind of suspect. They know they can go after the Christian vote if they check this box type deal.
Yeah.
And yet, these older Christians that are used to being in that majority, and now that they find themselves shifting back more towards an equilibrium or even a minority in some places, they're losing their mind. Oh, we got to get the right person in the White House. We got to get the right person in Congress. It's okay, yes, do what you can to get the people that you feel are important to be in those. That's fine, but don't live and die by it.
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, if God can use Quirinius and his greed to bring Jesus to Bethlehem, I'm pretty sure that he's okay and probably powerful enough, strong enough, wise enough to take care of the situations in our life, regardless of who our elected officials are.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying to be civil, not civil laziness, not Amish folks who just completely disengage from politics and they don't vote. I'm not saying that. You can vote and you can care deeply about politics, but don't live and die by it.
Not at the expense of taking away the trust that you should have in God.
Absolutely.
Because you have to put your faith and you have to put your trust in God. And like you just said, He's going to take care of you. There's nobody in any kind of form of government seat cares about me enough to move mountains. To do whatever it took to see my absolute well-being, to provide for me, to make a way, to give me the wisdom to be able to maybe navigate a certain situation. God does all that for me.
Yes.
The people in the White House don't even know that I exist.
Yeah.
And so they don't have but it's the best, as you know, it's the whole picture, Jared. You got to see the whole picture.
Yeah.
I'm like, I put my faith in the person who created the picture.
Yeah, it really is, and like people that will like sacrifice relationships.
Oh, I know.
That will like just be nothing but combative.
Yeah, I know.
And at the same time, claim Christ. Like be like if you, I'm sorry, I don't care if you like who's. And this is a total political rant in the middle of Christmas prophecy. I don't care if you didn't like Donald Trump, and I don't care if you don't like Joe Biden.
Yeah.
If you are a Christian and you speak ill of them,
you're going against the word.
That's not loving your enemy. That's not loving your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, listen, get back to the prophecy. If God can use a Roman governor as the means by which he fulfills this prophecy, maybe you should just chill out a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's I don't think that we give God enough credit. Like sometimes we feel like, well, we're going to take care of this for you, God. We're going to make sure that we get the right people. And he's like, listen, you don't understand how I'm moving behind the scenes in ways that you will never understand to bring about all sorts of good.
Yeah.
Like you don't understand because you can't always, like, we're not privy to what he's doing right now.
Yeah.
And in the same way, like Joseph and Mary are just following. They're not even following the orders of God right now. They're following the orders of the government, and all of that weirdness happens. So prophecy is fulfilled.
Yeah.
So come on, like chill out a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. That's just chill out. It's like God has got this. Like let's grow our faith a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is just incredible. I was texting you about this last night. This is also one of those prophecies for people that are like, sometimes people will go and say like, oh, well, some of the prophecies you say Jesus, that he fulfilled over 300 prophecies. Well, he had control over a lot of those, right? Like, for instance, the triumphal entry.
Yeah.
There's a prophecy that talks about, behold your king. He comes riding on a colt, the foal of a donkey, and all that. Okay, sure. Jesus intentionally fulfilled that prophecy. But first off, you have to say, when he intentionally fulfills that prophecy, it's because he absolutely is claiming that he is king, that he is Messiah, that he is God, all of that. He is absolutely doing that without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
And so there is a sense in which some of these prophecies he intentionally fulfilled. But he did that because he knew he was supposed to. But this whole thing of being born in Bethlehem, even as God in human form, in some sense, in Mary's womb, he doesn't have a say in where he's born.
Mm-mm.
He really doesn't. Like,
it wasn't like Ratatouille.
Yeah.
He's like grabbing on the inside of her and directing her where to go.
So there's some of these prophecies.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah,
the little mouse that
I
hangs
love
out.
Ratatouille.
Oh, it's
I
great.
worked in a movie theater when it came out.
Yeah.
And so I loved it.
Yeah.
Like, I watched it a bunch. And none of my family likes it, though. So
I love it. It's one of my favorite. That one and Wall-E.
Or I don't get to watch it very much. But, like,
we'll talk about Pixar movies later.
He had no control over this one.
Yeah.
Other than the sense that the father is working behind the scenes to put the son where he needs to be.
Yeah.
But, to say, oh, Jesus intentionally did this, like, no, you can't actually say that in the human sense.
Yeah.
So there's some of these prophecies that, sure, he intentionally fulfilled, but there's a bunch of them that No, he didn't have any say over the fact that he was born in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing, some people probably know this, Bethlehem. Do you know what Bethlehem means?
Mm-mm.
House of bread.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, Bethlehem means house of bread. Jesus in the Gospel of John comes out and says, "I am the bread of life." Like literally, Jesus, the bread of life, was born in the house of bread. Like just, you can't make that stuff up. So, I had a Christmas sermon about that one time, about how the bread of life is from the house of bread.
Yeah.
And how the bread of life will ultimately satisfy you and stuff like that. But don't miss that. Like Bethlehem literally means house of bread, and that's where Jesus is born.
That's awesome. Well, we got through 3 of them today. We have one more, but it's talking about Hosea, and it says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and I called my son out of Egypt.
Yeah.
And that's just talking about whenever Mary and Joseph left Bethlehem because they got word that a whole bunch of the babies, they were looking for Jesus. And so they were just following it. And then so whenever he was older, much older, then he came out of Egypt.
Yep.
Whenever they got wind that Herod was dead.
Yep. And if you follow through Matthew's gospel, he paints that out for you. Unless he was trying to tell, like, he's very intentional in the fact that he adds this story in.
Yeah.
Which doesn't happen in any of the other Gospels. Like, we don't find out about the Magi in any of the other Gospels.
Yeah.
But Matthew's doing it because it was the very thing that happened with Herod and the Magi that caused them to go to Egypt.
Yeah.
And then for him to ultimately be called out of Egypt to Nazareth. And a lot of that is because what you'll see if you look closely is that Jesus mimics the life of Old Testament Israel. Because he's meant to be a representative of all Israel, because he's going to be the one that fulfills the covenant in the ways that they failed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that prophecy from Hosea, yes, it is actually looking back to ancient Israel when God called them out of Egypt, out of their slavery and such. But it's also now being applied to the coming Messiah, who has to flee as a homeless immigrant before the time he can even walk and talk to Egypt. He's running for his life, and then ultimately, when King Herod dies, it's safe to come back to Palestine, and so they come back and they settle down in Nazareth.
Yeah.
Which then also fulfills another prophecy that he would be called a Nazarene.
Yep.
So it's just the prophecy stuff. I love talking about it because it really does blow my mind. And I understand people can be skeptical about it, and if that's your prerogative, that's fine. But like for me,
there's just too much coincidence.
There's just too much evidence for the main tenets of Christianity to where this stuff just strengthens my faith.
Yeah.
A whole lot.
Alrighty, man. That was a good one. What did we go? We got through 4. So we've got, 296 more prophecies to go.
Yeah, we can do some around Easter time. Will be fun.
Oh, yeah. That'd be good. Time for our mystery meet. Random question that is just submitted by everybody on staff here and gets typed up, written out, put in a bowl, and we just grab them at random. We don't know what it is. What would be the worst buy one get one free sale of all time?
The worst?
Yeah, the worst buy one get one free. I already know what yours is. It's vegetables.
Yeah, any green vegetable except for green beans. I also was thinking about tuna as well, because I really despise tuna. I know that you're on a fish kick right now.
I'm not a big fan of canned tuna, though. I like it fresh.
Yeah, like my mom and dad, I don't know, maybe not my dad, but I know my mom used to make it growing up.
Yeah.
And I always just remember it smelling so bad.
Yeah.
And like if I ever see people eating it, I'm just like, look, just look at it, just for a second. Just would you look at that? Like just look at it, man. How are you putting that mushy? I don't know why tuna popped into my mind. Maybe I wanted to rant on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, broccoli would definitely be really high on the list, and Brussels sprouts, because when you smell when you cook those,
oh yeah,
I don't care what anyone says. Like you might even like broccoli, but you're fooling yourself if you can't tell that your house stinks after you make it.
Yeah, I like the flavor of it. I don't care for the process or like the smell that happens whenever you cook it. Oh yeah, it's good. It's good for you, man.
I know it's good for me, but I mean
Just put some salt and butter on it.
It doesn't help.
Or a little bit of
I
cheese.
ate broccoli one time. You
ever tried it with cheese? Like cheese sauce?
Yeah, and I don't like it at all.
What?
No. But I ate broccoli one time, and I ate the whole thing. I didn't even complain about it. We were invited over to dinner at some of our friends' house one night, and they made like grilled chicken and whole potatoes and broccoli, and I didn't want to be rude. And so somehow I found it within myself this night that I literally ate the whole serving of broccoli that was given to me.
Yeah.
And it didn't like bother me at all somehow. But every other time I've ever tried broccoli in my life, I've almost had like I will make a mess. Cuz it just makes me want to puke. I just can't get past the smell. So,
dude.
yeah.
Okay, so worst buy one get one free sale of all time. If you go to a place that only sells like left shoes,
Yeah.
you only get 2 left shoes. That would be pretty bad. But I can't think of it. I don't know why I wrote this one, but I can't think of anything that would the worst buy one get one free sale.
Yeah.
Cats. I don't like cats.
Oh, get out of here.
Yeah.
I'll do a whole episode on my cats.
No, it won't happen.
I love them. This is crazy too because I went my whole life thinking I hated cats.
You told me earlier today to be more open to creative ideas. This is one I'm putting my foot down on.
I'm telling you, I lived my whole life being thinking I hated cats, and then I saw how much Landon loved my sister's cat.
Yeah.
And so Megan and I just broke down 3 years ago, and was it 3 years ago? Maybe two Christmases ago.
Yeah.
And I got this.
That's whenever y'all got
we
Bert.
got that cat, and now I've never seen a cat like this though.
Yeah.
Like he reminds me of a dog. Like he comes and sits on my lap. I can rub his belly like you do a dog, and he will literally roll over like this, like a dog does. I've never seen anything like it. Now, we got another cat for Olivia's birthday. That little cat, I love that thing so much, but it is not a people person like this. It's like every other cat I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like Bert has changed my mind completely on cats.
Yeah.
I love that stinking cat.
I think obviously I'm like really allergic to cats. I've been over to your house and I'm like, I gotta leave.
Buy one, get one Benadryl. EpiPens.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed today's conversation. This is coming out the Friday before Christmas, so we just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. We hope that you enjoy the time with your friends and with your family. We hope that you are making wonderful memories. We're thinking of you. We are praying for you. We love you all. Merry Christmas from all of us here at the Pastor's Potluck and Southridge Church.
If you're listening on Friday when this drops, come see us tomorrow morning, Saturday at 9 and 11. We're having our Christmas Eve services.
Oh, yeah, good plug.
So if you're listening to this on Friday, if you're listening to this at a different time, do not come a day later than when you listen to this, unless you're listening on Friday.
Yeah.
But, yeah, come check those out. We got a great service planned for tomorrow.
Yeah, they're going to show up on, like, December 31st. Like, where's the services at?
Yeah.
You're like, wrong Friday.
Wrong Friday, yeah.
Christmas Eve. Alrighty, guys. Y'all have a wonderful day. Take care. Be safe. Thank you so much for listening in with us today. We really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and you can also watch the video version of this on YouTube as well. All you have to do is search up the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. From all of us here, we want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week.